Balcones' first ever year-round bourbon was an inspiration. It all had to work together. A blend of carefully selected ingredients, Texas-sized pot stills, and creative people determined to find the absolute best way to usher a new whiskey along. When you discover how it pairs with a meaningful moment, suddenly the feeling of drinking great whiskey becomes a whole lot more.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of Whiskey Neat, spirited conversations with interesting people. I am your host, Kristopher Hart, and I am in a fantastic, well-energized mood. I got a fresh haircut, a nice shave. Shout out to Lou's Barbershop in Clear Lake. Mary, you're my main woman. Is that what you say? Main woman? Okay, we'll just say I'm a cool guy. I'll say that. So before we get into this, I want to address something. I've always wanted to write something, but I'm not a writer. But I can talk, I do that for a living at times. I want to talk about Buffalo Trace for a second. Any big corporate company tends to be more specific, more particular about how things are presented. They don't want to offend this person or offend that person. And recently, Buffalo Trace has started sponsoring podcasts like Joe Rogan, the Whiskey Ginger with Andrew Santino, a couple other podcasts where this brand, who doesn't need to promote, has started promoting, and on top of promoting, they have removed any kind of uptight, really restrictive persona. In fact, in the reads of those two podcasts, Buffalo Trace put in the read the only bourbon with balls. You can see it right on the label, because there's a picture of a buffalo on the label, and it's a male buffalo. To me, that blows my mind that we're finally in an era where people can relax a little bit. And it's always happened with, smaller brands. Some smaller brands don't care. But it makes me happy. And today, just before I came in, on Twitter, you guys remember Talladega Nights? Ricky Bobby says, if you don't drink it, if you don't chew red gum, then F you. And on the official Buffalo Trace Twitter, they said, if you don't drink Buffalo Trace, then F you. I thought it was amazing. Fred Minnick's response was, what? People were offended. Some people were upset. But it was lighthearted in nature. And listen, we don't need to be in this era of holding each other's hands. What I would say in my own home, or what I would say to friends in person, you should be able to say, there's a reason why there's HBO and there's NBC or CBS, right? If I want to watch some of the best television shows of this era, they're not on NBC or CBS. They're on Showtime. They're on HBO. Some of the greatest uncensored, raw, violent. We're adults. So I'm rambling. I'm super excited to see a really, really big brand take a very, very relaxed approach. And Where are we? Today's episode, I'm so excited. I'm so excited to sit down with Jack Ferris from Bushmills. Bushmills is the oldest licensed distillery in the world. 1608, I believe. They're on the back of the euro. They're on the back of their money in Ireland. I've talked about Bushmills on the show. They're one of the few Irish distilleries I've always loved. And we can't talk about it with Jack Ferris, so I'm going to tell you now. I did talk to him about Conor McGregor, a certain MMA fighter's whiskey that we've speculated has been from Bushmills. It is a joint venture that is done with them that they're not allowed to comment on. So obviously that brand needs to handle their PR their way. Bushmills is worried about Bushmills. I will say this, I am a fan of Bushmills, and I am not a fan of other brands. All right, let's get to our sponsors. This week's show is, as always, sponsored by Terlato Distell Artisan Spirits, leader in premium artisan products like Bunnahabhain, Deanston, Ledaig, Tobermory, Bains, Black Bottle, and Scottish Leader. You can pick up the entire line at your local liquor store, or if you are a retailer, reach out to your United Wine and Spirits rep. Whiskey Neat is supported by the Inspired Spirits at Glass Rev Imports and Amrut Distilleries. We love featuring Amrut whiskeys on the show. Amrut crafts single malt whiskey to the exacting standards of Scotch, and if you need proof, well, at this year's Proof Awards, God, I just got a whiff from the glass. Amrut Fusion received double gold, 96 points, in a blind tasting by 30 industry judges. Amrut appreciates the great state of Texas and has become the number one consumer of this elixir of life, which is what the word Amrut means in America. And I'm telling you, man, if you are a peat fan, Amrut Fusion is goddamn fire. I love it. The next couple episodes will be featuring a lot from Murray McDavid. I'm excited to get these bottles in, including a 13-year-old, a 36-year-old. There's a couple bottlings of these that just came in that I cannot wait to talk about and taste. So we will feature those on the upcoming episodes. But in the meantime, without further ado, Jack Ferris, Jeff Rogers from Proximo, and I believe we have another guest. I'll wait till he comes in. Cheers. We've got a long, storied history leading up to this point, starting with you. I remember running into you. I think you were at either the first or the second Whiskey Social. You were working at the Stranahan's.
That's correct.
For Proximo, right?
That's exactly right, yeah.
And then I met Jeff through Jay Friedman. He introduced me to you.
There's a shout out for you.
Yeah, and it's been this transition. And then recently, can I be honest? Mm-hmm. Not as great of a meeting you. You want to know why?
Go on.
Because you promised us last Wednesday. Here we go. You promised us during the World Series that since you've been in town, we haven't lost a game. And the one night you opened your mouth,
I was getting nervous.
Show's over. Show's over.
So can we just cut all this out? We can. Yeah, absolutely.
Show's over.
Very nice meeting you. Yes, it's been.
Take you to the woodshed.
There you go.
I am
That's
a fan.
funny.
I am a fan, but I had to mention it.
Well done.
We did a show with. Who did we do last week? Oh, the Come and Take It Comedy Festival. There's a big comedy event happening in town this weekend, and that recording was done the last game before the last game. So
I'll be darned. Yeah.
The guy on was like, when we win tonight, and I was like, my God dang it! Like, you got to open your mouth. I don't know if you're superstitious in Ireland, but a lot of us are pretty particular with how superstition works here in the U.S.
Especially with baseball. Baseball's the most superstitious, I think, of all. We had to watch every game on my patio, to be quite honest with you.
So we get to blame Jack for the rest of the
We
year.
get to blame Jack. Yeah.
So it's all your
Hey,
fault.
listen, if there's anything we're good at,
next year you're not coming in.
if there's anything we're good at, it's blaming foreigners.
That is true.
It was a good run up until then. I mean, lose 3 games after it came into town. Great games. And you have to admit, the last game, nail biting. So,
it was rough. But we had a great time. We had this fantastic dinner. I don't get to go to Armadillo Palace often. Is that what it's called? Armadillo Palace?
Right. Yeah, correct.
But we had, and
Cool
you guys
event.
made a real Irish coffee. And I had 3 of them. They were the best part of the night
That's
for
good.
me. I'm a huge fan of coffee and Scotch, Scotch single malt. So together it was just like so nice way to end. And then of course the night was ruined. But that's something else altogether. So I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad to talk. I've talked about Bushmills before on the show. I don't think Irish gets enough credit nowadays. Everyone's talking about Scotch, and then now everything's all about bourbon. And to be honest with you, I think bourbon can be a bit boring at times. But I'm such a huge supporter of Irish whiskey, and you guys have been doing it for a little bit. How long have you guys been doing it?
well, with a license, 411 years. But we know on our site we've had almost 1,000 years of distillation history. So, a little bit of experience.
A little bit of time. You guys are the oldest, right?
We are the world's oldest licensed. So we had that license signed back on the 20th of April, 1608 by King James I. So, and we've always occupied the same site. So that license was signed to the area of the route, and we're still in the area of the route. That's right up on the north coast of Ireland, so in County Antrim. So we're only 1 mile from the North Atlantic Ocean.
And one thing I learned that night was that you guys are actually, in America, we're big about putting politicians on money. One great reason why Ireland is better than us is you have a distillery on the back of your money.
Yeah, and that's in every denomination. So, as I say, what I brought here, we've got 5 and a 10. We've also got new editions that are only printed just back in April. And the back of every single note we have, printed by the Bank of Ireland, Bushmills Whiskey Distillery is printed on every single note. So whenever the Bank of Ireland dictates we're more important than any politician, any person, that gives you an idea just how important Bushmills actually is. I mean, we're not just a brand. Bushmills is a place. It is a village. I mean, even the name Bushmills comes from where we are. So on the River Bush, And then the first industry was the milling of the barley. So Bushmills is something very, very important, something very, very special. So it's much more than just a brand, much more than just a whiskey, much more than just a distillery. It is something that is ingrained in our blood. I mean, I was only born and raised 5 miles from that distillery. So it is something I'm phenomenally proud about. And the fact I'm sitting here in Houston on a damn hot day, which you can tell I'm Irish because,
What are you talking about? It's wintertime
oh
outside.
yeah, wintertime, yeah. Which not used to this level of humidity, this level of heat. I mean, it's great.
Level of
but,
anything, really. Yeah. Traffic, or, I mean, all of it's horrible.
So yeah, it's nice. And again, it's the fact that I get to travel around America and I get to tell this story. And this story that I've been born and raised with, I mean, grown up with. I mean, I remember in primary school, we were taking on tours around that distillery. So ever since I've been tiny, that distillery's always been a part of me. So again, it's something.
You know, it's as Americans the closest sense of pride that I had Ancestry.com done back in 2011, and just besides the fact that I look like I'm from Ireland with the red beard, but just getting that confirmation, there's this sense of swelling. Of course, on St. Paddy's Day, we're all Irish, but it's something that I'm proud of. And then when I get someone like you on, I'm like, oh, I'm nothing, I'm garbage. like your voice, everything about you is deeply enrooted in hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of history there on site. So I had a tremendous time having dinner the other night, or the tasting, and then we had some. One thing I learned was that Bushmills goes great with fried oysters, so that was a fantastic night. But it was a great learning experience, and for a brand that I've already enjoyed, it's something that I felt like I got a little more out of. So one thing we like to do on the show is we like to drink. So let's jump in. Where would you say we can start? You could tell us a little bit about your core lineups, and then maybe get to the little funky weird stuff, and kind of inform the listeners.
Yeah, definitely.
Sure.
So basically, what I think we should start off with, since I am in Houston, let's have a whiskey that's made for just the American palate, and that'll be our Red Bush. So a Red Bush is going to be a 4-year-old whiskey.
No jokes.
Blended whiskey. And that's only going to be 4 years inside first fill American bourbon barrels. So because of that, what you're going to get is all these sweet bourbon influences. But remember, it's our whiskey. We've matured it. We've distilled it. It comes from our very site.
Can't reach.
So basically, this is designed for that sweeter American bourbon palate. But everything we have is at 80 proof. Everything we have is triple distilled. It's all chill filtered.
I've never gotten that amount of pear on a whiskey before. There's a great distillery out of Louisville called Copper and Kings that they do a pear brandy that I have lauded. I'm such a huge fan of. That Red Bush right off the palate is those fresh stone fruits, or fruits that have seed in the middle, right? Are pears stone fruits?
It's more seeded fruit.
Sure.
But the pear, basically, that is our raw distillate. Our raw distillate, so the copper we've just over there, and it is a bit of our copper pot still. Whenever you're in our still house, it's peaches, it's pear drops, it's a little bit of red apple. It's just that sweet, ripe fruit, and that's the distillate.
That's 100% pear. I mean, I would be, if you had told me that was a brandy, I'd be almost convinced, blind. That is fantastic.
And again, in the background, then you get the vanilla, you get a little bit of oakiness, but then you get the dryness. And the best thing with the dryness is that, unlike traditional bourbon, where that dryness means a bite, well, there's no bite, there's no burn. You're ready for that next sip. So works out perfectly. Designed again for the American palate. Designed to be a little bit sweeter.
Oh, we love our sugar.
We do.
That's for sure.
Unfortunately, I know.
So
This is from your pot stills?
Hey, it's a pleasure being here.
Absolutely.
Beat you to the cheers, my man. Yeah.
We've got 6 more to go, so we're good to go.
Well,
First one.
at least 6.
Taking the shuttle, Ubering.
So this is actually from your pot still.
This is from one of our decommissioned pot stills.
That's a bit thin.
Well, they do wear down. So that would have been at least double the thickness. So that was usually a still lasts anywhere between 20, sometimes up to 40 years. It just depends what part of the still it's from, and it depends what part of the still house it's coming from. So every year we do what we call a silent season, a cold shutdown, and we measure the inside of the still. Now, we do it the old school technique. You take a piece of string, you go inside, you measure it, and if that string's got a little bit longer, well, the still's got a little bit thinner. I mean, there's no need to do any modern way to do this.
Sure.
That technique has lasted us 411 years. We don't need to change that
That's
method.
pretty good.
Pretty simple.
So,
yeah.
So whenever we noticed the string was getting long enough, we realized it was probably about this thickness. That was time to get that still replaced. So, but again, that is the real deal. Everything we'll be drinking right now has passed through that piece of metal. So again, it is the real deal.
How many stills do you guys have?
We've got 10 stills. We've got 4 wash stills, 3 low wine stills, and we've then got 3 spirit stills. We're at full capacity. We're producing 5 million litres of spirit every single year. But Bushmills, like all Irish whiskey, is going through a growth right now. And we're actually building a mirror still house, an exact mirror image of exactly how we're producing whiskey right now.
So you're trying to double capacity?
We are doubling capacity. We've also acquired new land. So we've used up all 63 acres of our site. We've got over 18 warehouses. And we'll be building a further 22 over the next roughly between 10 to 20 years. So Irish whiskey is growing, and Bushmills with that is growing. And the best thing is that lately we've been able to show the world, particularly being able to show America, what we are capable of. Again, that whiskey tasting that we made at last week.
Yeah.
Well, we brought out a few nice little surprises.
You brought 3 fantastic surprises. I've never been a proponent that older is always better. In fact, I mean, there's some fun things. Like we partnered with Lynn Cantata, and we got in like some 45-year-old Armagnac. That was a fun experience, but it didn't objectively taste good. It was way past its prime.
Yep.
But the 27-year-old. You flagging me down? Oh no. The I think it was a 27-year-old cognac cask.
27-year-old cognac.
It was bloody brilliant, man. It was fantastic.
106 proof cask.
That
was
one,
the last
on chill
right?
filter.
That was the last one.
But
But
can I get a little more of that, please?
the Crystal Malt was fantastic too. It was so you get in bourbon, you're very familiar with brown sugar notes, maple syrup, treacle, that kind of molasses type brown sugar notes. The Crystal Malt to me reminded me exactly of fresh white sugar. Like it was like this bright kind of a sweet, almost like when you make rum with rum agricole, you use fresh cane juice. So it had like this fresh, really just bright sugar notes to it. The whole thing was just such a fun side of Bushmills I've never seen before. And I was like, oh, you guys have to come on next week. So as soon as we got you back, I was like, we've got to sit down. So it was fantastic.
Yeah. And again, it's just to show the world what we are capable of. And it's also just showing Bushmills is bringing out new things, bringing out new expressions. And we do have the largest stock of aged single malt anywhere in Ireland. And suddenly, these warehouses, these crypts that were sealed off, that no one is able to see, well, those doors are starting to open up right now.
Sure.
So just keep your eyes on Bushmills, because bigger and better things are coming along.
Do we have a peek as to what's coming to the U.S. anytime soon, even in an LTO capacity?
Well, even so, for any of the listeners that have visited Bushmills Distillery, particularly within the last 12 months, we do have a distillery exclusive, only kept within the confines of the distillery. We only did a 12,000 bottle release, but that was a 10-year single malt finished inside acacia wood. Now,
Interesting.
The Irish Whiskey Act of 1980 just said essentially a wooden cask. So we
Didn't say what kind.
So not white oak. So we were able to bring out and finish something within acacia wood. Now that gives you an idea of just what we are capable of.
I remember when this came out because the Snickers were quite prevalent. I'm a huge fan of anything sherry finished. But is this sherry finished, sherry mature? Tell me about Blackbush.
So Blackbush is going to be an 8-year-old whiskey. It's going to be 80% single malt.
8-year-old, wow.
And it's going to be 80% Oloroso sherry cask. And that's not a finish. That's the
Full
minimum
matured.
8 years inside Oloroso sherry. So Oloroso sherry is inherently very dry, very nutty. But again, our distillate, as you found with the Red Bush, it is ripe fruit. Now, with that marriage of the two between, it's Christmas cake, it's fruit cake.
I'm getting a little bit of pear on the initial, right as I go to pour in, and then I'm getting a ton of those dried fruits, that sherry influence. Very, very much a fan of the Blackbush.
So yeah, Blackbush is essentially what a lot of people, in particular our master blender, Helen Mulholland, she calls it our lovable rogue. Now the best thing about Blackbush is you can take as long as you want with it, because that finish, you just notice, just lingers and glows. Now, if it ever does get cold here in Deanston, which people have told me it does.
It's cold outside right
yeah,
now.
yeah,
Oh, it's freezing outside.
There's
Believe you.
we've had a pretty cold year. There's been at least 4 hours of cold in Houston the whole year.
In a row, too.
We got a cold front coming.
But as weather gets a little bit colder, if the wind comes in, that Blackbush, that long lingering finish, that gentle glow that comes in, because you just notice it comes in the jawline, lingers in the throat.
Yeah.
It's just a whiskey you take your time with.
And how old is it? You said
So 8 years old.
8 years old.
8 years old, 80% single malt, and 80% single malt for any blended whiskey from around the world is almost unheard of. So
The rule of eights.
It is something very, very special. This is a whiskey that has never changed since 1898.
What's the price point on the Blackbush?
So the Blackbush would be roughly in around about
$28.99, less than $30.
Less than 30 bucks
For
for 8-year-old
750, yeah.
Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I
see,
know.
going back to the ridiculousness of bourbon right now, there's a celebrity bourbon that's coming out that's 2 years for $150. So for 8 years, sub 30, he's a hockey guy, Belfour or something or other.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There's some fantastic. I've been a huge supporter of Texas whiskey for a long time, but it's hard to. In this current environment, I'm very much appreciative of just 8 years, sub 30, solid Irish whiskey, fully matured sherry. What is there to complain about?
Yep.
Did you say 150?
Yeah, I think I want to say it's like 130, 140.
There you go.
It's hard. I know I'm a little familiar with how our horrible 3-tier system works, but just working backwards, for you guys to put all that time and love into an 8-year Irish, sub 30, you're not making much money off this. I mean,
No, not really.
you guys are very much sacrificing profit for love. Like there's a sub 30 in America is a lot less in Ireland.
Well, you have to remember, like, the way Bushmills has been created is that everything.
Is that yours or mine?
Oh,
This is mine. Yeah. I had two because I had some peated whiskey in this one.
So the thing about Bushmills is that essentially everyone who's worked in our distillery is a father, a mother, uncle, aunt, sister, cousin.
Well, I think your wood guy is a third.
But we're now in the 4th generation of father to son. We've still got Alistair Kane and his son Chris Kane. And thankfully, Chris Kane has actually started having a relationship with one of the girls in the shop.
Yeah.
So
maybe a 5th generation.
Maybe the 5th generation comes along.
What a pressure! Like what if his first two are girls? So, just.
Well, that's the thing about Bushmills. Our master blender, Hel Mulholland, was the first female master blender ever in Irish whiskey history. So it's one of the things with Bushmills that we don't care who you are. If you're fit for the job, you're perfect for the job. So if he is a daughter, even better. So
it's still 5 generations of the same bloodline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but the big thing about Bushmills, like after work, because Bushmills is a village. The people who work in the distillery live in the village itself. The village is only about 1,100 people. It's a tiny, tiny place. But once you finish your shift, you go down to the local main street. Well, you can enjoy your Blackbush. You can enjoy your hard day's work.
Is there a employee program like Jack Daniels does, like a half every first Friday of the month? There's like a $3.75 that they give employees. Is there a Bushmills?
There's definitely
there's some benefits there. Some
There's
perks.
definitely a few nice perks working in the distillery.
Well, this Blackbush is bloody.
Lynchburg dry, Lynchburg's dry, so they have to give it away almost a little bit. Great whiskey, but you know what I mean.
Can't
Bushmills,
charge.
they give it to you for teething.
So what's this puppy here?
Sexton. This is going to be something very unique. So the Sexton is going to be a 4-year-old single malt, triple distilled inside copper pot stills. And again, 100% single malt, but we only malt the barley out using hot, clean, fresh air. So the Sexton itself is going to be inside mainly first fill Oloroso sherry casks.
Wow.
We do use a little bit of second and third fill, but using predominantly first fill sherry casks means that sherry influence.
It's going to be dry.
It's going to be very, very distinctive. So the Sexton itself, the name comes from the sextons. They were the last people who looked at you before you were put into the grave. Now, back in the old days of Ireland,
I know. He really got
what a
morbid.
dark-
quite dark. But
very dark
there is
there,
also
man.
a lighter note to it. So back in Ireland, sometimes if you drunk too much, you'd pass out for maybe a couple of days. So whenever you're in the grave,
Yeah.
a bell was tied to a string, which is tied to your finger. The sextons would mind the graves overnight, And if they hear the bell, well, they know to take you back out again. So the sexton is essentially something very, very intringent to the old Irish ways.
Jesus. We landed in Dublin, but we drove to Shannon, stayed there, visited a few. You've got one of the things I love about Ireland is you've got the oldest pubs in Europe are in Ireland. And if you're going to visit Ireland, you got to visit castles, you got to visit churches, you got to visit some ruins, and you got to visit the pubs, right? So we stopped at Sean's Bar in Athlone, which has been around since 900 AD. It's 1100 years of that building being there. And then we went all the way to Shannon, just south of Shannon, which what's just south of Shannon, but north of the Kerry.
You're in the Cork area.
Yeah, correct. We were near Cork. So we stopped in. When we got to the airport, I had almost a panic attack because not only is it the first time I'm driving on this side of the road, but also the roads are this wide.
Pretty narrow.
And in Texas, we all have trucks. There's plenty of room, and
one person per vehicle.
One person per vehicle. Being in Ireland, it was like I was sweating like you right now. Like, my wife was like, "Are you okay?" I was like, "I'm fine. I'm trying to process the difference in size of everything."
On the wrong side, everything. Yeah.
What was the craziest thing about your roads is you'd have tour buses, which are full size.
Oh yeah.
And somehow they still stayed in their lanes, but it doesn't feel like it when you come around a corner and you see a double-decker tour bus coming around just as fast, and everything's in kilometers. So I'm like, what's that? Is it like 50 miles an hour? Like,
Nice.
So I don't understand how anyone could ever have one drink and drive, let alone, Awesome. So it was just, it was a great experience, and it was one of my favorite places. And we're going back next year, so I'm super excited.
That's great.
I want to come to Dublin. A few years ago, there was not Dublin.
Belfast.
There was some nervousness around the Northern Ireland part. Americans are very sensitive about terrorism, and I was like, I don't know if we should go. I want to go to Giant's Causeway. I want to go to Bushmills. I want to go to Belfast. So much of your countryside we didn't get to visit because we went Dublin to Shannon and just that little guts in between.
And you tend to find a lot of Americans I speak to, whenever they visit Ireland, that's the area they mainly go to. A lot of people tend to forget that, since 1998, we've had one of the world's strongest peace agreements. We're some of the most welcoming people up in the North Coast.
Couldn't have been nicer.
We are some of the most undiscovered people. I mean, you go to Belfast. I mean, the pubs there, it is just incredible. My favourite pub in Belfast has to be Kelly's Cellars, built in 1720. You go in, not one part of the floor is level. So, I mean, you're standing at the bar, you're standing every single direction possible. But the Guinness in there is phenomenal. The Black Bush on the side, excellent. But then you've also got a place like the Duke of York, one of the most famous whiskey bars in Belfast. And whenever you go up to the North Coast, favourite bar in the world, which you did go to, didn't you? The Harbour Bar?
I went to the Harbour Bar.
Harbour Bar. Guy in there called Willie Gregg. One of the most incredible bartenders in the world.
Willie Gregg.
But that Harbour Bar, it is the epitome of the North Coast of Ireland. It's just, people will be drinking everywhere within the bar. I mean, it's about half the size of this room.
Yeah, true.
And yet it'll have maybe about 40 people in it.
Well, we've talked about.
So it's elbow to elbow. Literally.
I thought the town was deserted. We went to the bars. There's where everybody's at.
We've talked about here in the U.S. how we're very particular about so after church on Sundays we would go to Luby's, right? My grandmother would order the Luann.
There you go.
There would be no drinking, right? We went to Ireland. We walked into Sean's Bar on a Sunday afternoon. First of all, the bar's open on a Sunday, and family, grandparents, parents, children go in, they order fish and chips, they sit down, the grandfather's having a Guinness. That spoke to me on such a primal, peaceful level. It was so zen. Everything about that just seemed like pure
That's awesome.
enjoyment of life. Like, it was such a God, Ireland is one of the best experiences we've ever had.
It's fantastic.
And particularly that moment. So, for example, whenever you're on a Sunday, the sun's going down, the wind's beating on the door, the rain's starting to come in, but you've got the fireplace on, you put the feet up, even somewhere like Bushmills Inn, and you have a glass.
You have your own pub?
Well, no, the Bushmills Inn, it's actually it's a little boutique hotel. It's been around for, well, the building itself is almost 200 years old.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And do you remember the little fireplace at the front?
Outside. Absolutely.
Yeah, little wee peat fireplace, 2 rocking chairs in front of it. You've got a glass of good Bushmills. You've even got a glass of Sexton. I mean, this is less than $30 a bottle. And you can just put your feet up, relax. Well, that's Ireland.
Sure.
So
It's fantastic. It really is good. We went there for the Open this year, and a lot of the golfers stayed there at the Bushmills Inn, which is right there by the Bushmills Distillery. It's really fantastic. It's really nice.
Everything's
which is
just-
right by the causeway. You mentioned the causeway. Sorry. You mentioned the causeway. The bottle is shaped from some of those causeways, Jack.
Is that where it comes from?
That's where it comes from. Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Yeah.
So that hexagonal shape, that basically, Giant's Causeway's got about roughly anywhere between 40 to 60,000 hexagonal basalt columns. It's considered to be one of the extra wonders of the world.
And for those who don't know what we're talking about, if you just Google Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, there's this beautiful rock formation that's natural, and they're all this shape. They're all hexagonal. Hexagonal. You got me.
Yeah.
You got me confused.
Hexagonal.
Hexagonal. They're just this really bizarre natural formation of geometric shapes that is, like you said, almost a bucket list item to visit.
And the reason we shape the bottle like that is that very rock that goes on to make those hexagonal columns. Well, further inland, what's gone out to sea to create that formation, our water and the water that goes in to make the sexton has run over that very rock. So this is a nod to exactly where the sexton comes from, where the water source comes from.
So where does the name come from? I know you mentioned that the guys mining the graves and monitoring potential guys who just had too much to drink, but what's the inspiration? Is just a piece of the Irish culture,
It's, well, basically, so in Ireland, and this is obviously we're going to a little bit morbid territory, but an Irish wake.
It's charming coming out of your accent.
I know, right?
You could talk about abortions right now. You'll be totally okay.
It's great.
But basically, an Irish wake is almost a celebration of someone's life. So whenever someone dies, it's, well, firstly, you have to close every single curtain in the house for 3 days. But everyone comes in, friends and family that you've never seen for your entire life. Everyone comes together to celebrate that life. So death is very much a big part of Irish culture. It's not something we focus on too much because it's just always been there. But it's a thing that very much brings people together. And it's a thing that great Irish whiskey always does. I mean, the fact we're all here together right
Absolutely.
now
That's
just
fantastic,
showcases the fact this is what Irish whiskey does. And good Irish whiskey really will always make someone have that second glass, that third glass, and let those stories flow and celebrate and toast to that person's life. So that is where a lot of the different styles cross over.
It's I up until this point, I had seen this. I did not know this was y'all's brand, let alone related to Bushmills.
It's so basically the sexton is actually crafted by a lady who works within the maturation area, but this is her product. It's a lady called Alex Thomas. So she's the master blender of sexton, and she decided what was best to create a new style of whiskey.
It
was a
reminds
triple
me of the-
distilled single malt, almost first fill Oloroso sherry cask. So with that boldness, but then that Irish smoothness, you've gained everything. You've sacrificed nothing.
It reminds me of the Black Bush, but a bit more mouthfeel, a bit more bold.
Yeah.
And is this and this is a full size bottle too, right?
So this will be a
Full size,
750,
yeah.
and then we've also got a
Interesting.
liter size as well.
I've always never quite understood how that worked. How you can come up with any bottle shape and it still all be 750.
True.
So again, with Alex Thomas, one of the most incredible things about her is that Alex Thomas, she knows what is within the Bushmills warehouse. She knows what is in every single one of our 18 warehouses. And she's in control of everyone who works up in our warehouses. Now, unfortunately, there is going to be some people working in the distillery listening to this podcast right now. So I have to be fairly polite to them because some of them can be, what's the best way to put it, intimidating as well. Large, very large people. Because again, if you're working in a whiskey warehouse, I mean,
Popeye forearms. Yeah.
yeah, like the
A lot of-
smallest barrels we have are 55 gallon. I mean, and we can
Full, that's 500, 600 pounds. Yeah.
go, and we can go up to barrels that are nearly 4 times that size.
Yeah.
So you can imagine the size of these people. So the last thing I'm going to do is
You want to say something ugly about him?
no, never.
Tell us about Jeff.
But,
That's why he's a
Not this Jeff, the
That's
other
why
Jeff.
he's a marathon runner, so he can run fast. You know what I mean?
yeah, run away from them. But basically, Alex in control of everyone, and she gets all these teams to work up in the picking squads. And whenever that was realised of what Alex was capable of, what she knew was up there, and how quickly, straight on the ball, Alex wanted to create this style of new whiskey, and this is exactly what it is. So the Sexton is its own style. I mean, obviously there is some relationships within Bushmills, but
Sure.
the Sexton is its own, and this is Alex's creation. And again, Alex is
So you showing love to another family member, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm very proud to call it one of our sisters. And the whiskey, it stands up. And this is why it's the #1 selling single malt in the United States.
Oh, is it really?
Well, Irish single malt.
Irish single malt, yeah.
Irish single malt. But again, the whiskey stands up. And one of the best things I've enjoyed having this in is, again, as the weather's starting to change, either a twist on an espresso martini, a sextini, or a wood smoked old fashioned, because that oakiness, because the first fill sherry cask is coming out. If you get something almost like a cedar smoking happening on that, it really complements that woody influence. But since we're talking about single malt now, let's talk about an even bigger family of single malts.
What we're known for.
This is your more specific age stated single malt range.
So firstly,
Still all extremely affordable too. Like that's one of the great things I've given you guys credit for is we are in a current age that every brand is continually climbing in price. There's new brand sourcing, so of course it's going to be naturally more expensive. You guys are not only putting out a great range of NOS, but you're also bringing out a great range of age-stated, totally affordable, extremely approachable, consistently available. I mean, what's there to complain about? You guys got everything.
Yeah, and this is why we've stood the test of time. I mean, to give you an example, to prove we've stood the test of time, is that at one stage there was probably about 1,000 distilleries in Ireland. Most illegal, some legal. Now, coming into 1920, there was well over 120, some argue is 150 whiskey distilleries within Ireland.
1920?
1920 is a very important date because that is when Prohibition was fully introduced.
And we don't talk about those days.
Well, to give you an idea of how much this impacted
failed experiment.
the Irish market had, by 1933, 5th of December 1933, there was only one distillery left open in Ireland, and that was Bushmills.
They all shut down except for
every
Bushmills.
other whiskey distillery either began closing down, began stopping operations, began just mothballing. What we actually did, we increased production. We expanded our distillery. We knew it couldn't last much longer because, well, there was that many of our Irish brethren within the United States by that stage. And so whenever the 5th of December 1933 came along, we had our own fleet of steamships. And our first one was
Ready to
called
go.
the SS Bushmills, ready to send all those shipments into the United States. So this is how much of a relationship we've had, and this is why I say we have stood the test of time. And we haven't changed when others have. We haven't moved when others have as well. So it is something very, very special about Bushmills. We have stood the test of time.
Was that a segue into the steamship, which is at duty free, the steamship?
Well,
Bushmills?
yes.
Which
So-
we don't have here, unfortunately. But
Well, not here,
Yeah.
but again,
Look at
we are
the
trying some of
market.
our single malts that you can buy within the United States right now, straight off the liquor shelves.
Yeah.
But if for anyone who's traveling, particularly international, and particularly international towards Ireland, which I would encourage, that's probably the best way to go. Within those airports, we've actually got 4 other single malts that are just part of a steamship collection that are only available for duty free. So we've got number 3 bourbon barrel char, we've got a port pipe, we've got a rum cask, and we've got a sherry cask. So this is again showcasing Bushmills is growing.
You got a little bit of everything.
So yeah, and
Have you guys considered a single barrel program? I don't know of anyone in
Yeah.
Ireland doing it
I
currently.
know.
So there's
And
look,
it's extremely popular in bourbon. And Scotch is starting to dabble in it.
there's a lot of different things on the table right now. We're taking bit by bit by bit. Who knows?
Text somebody.
All right, let's hit the next one here. So this is the 10-year.
So yeah, this is the 10-year. The 10-year is going to be a 2-wood whiskey, minimum 10 years in bourbon, minimum 10 years inside sherry, but it's going to be predominantly bourbon barrel.
So you age separately.
Side by side, simultaneous.
Okay.
I know only at the time of bottling.
That's good.
Then
No doubt.
we bring it together. Now this is actually what I call my summertime whiskey because it is so light, it is so delicate, it is so floral. For me, I know you're calling this winter today.
You're dying.
Yeah,
We have
But,
4 seasons.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Summer,
no,
summer.
Yeah. Hotter, hottest. Yeah.
But this, whenever it's sunny, whenever it's warm, because this is such a light style of whiskey, it is so delicate. This is the one I'm always going for. This is something as well, and I believe dinner afterwards. There's going to be a lot of oysters there.
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's one day we were doing a
Cold?
I'm going to taste this.
Yes.
'Cause- go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm
we
gonna
did a
taste it so bad.
single malt
Apparently.
pairing, and I was allowed to create the recipe, what worked, what paired, what didn't. And what I decided to do, and this was advice from Helen, because the way Helen Mulholland, the master blender for Bushmills, The way she loves her 10-year is when it's chilled. So I decided to take this level to the next step. So we put it in the freezer for about 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours.
Got some
We
oysters.
then got some northeast coast oysters, so a little bit smaller,
good
but
ones.
the
Oh, that
flavor,
sounds
the flavor's a little
awesome.
more
Yeah,
intense.
yeah.
Not your gnarly,
Gnarly
gulp.
golf, you've got 2 on per
Yeah, where
hour.
it's just
I
like,
got you.
wow, how am I going to deal with this one?
Sure, sure.
But little northeast coast oysters, and we had 2 servers. One was giving out the oyster, and the second one had the frozen bottle of 10-year and just poured it over
Oh, on the oyster.
on the oyster. So
Interesting.
Instead of having to do your vinaigrette, well, you just poured it over and you just down and wow.
Yeah.
Because by freezing it,
Do you do anything with like no horseradish? It's just
Let's go.
Oh, no,
the
this-
10-year-old Irish single malt.
that's all you need.
What is the sauce? Mignette?
There's a name for it,
What's the
right?
little vinegar sauce that comes with the Mignette? Whatever.
Yeah.
This should replace that with the shallots.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Vinegar mixed together.
It's good.
We're gonna
Have you had it?
We're gonna try it tonight.
Oh.
So we'll
Yeah.
Yeah.
it tonight, yeah.
No, it was the winner of the night.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So, but again, because we've frozen it, and because obviously 80 proof alcohol doesn't freeze solid, what you can do is make it that little more viscous. You're going to close off that evaporating alcohol.
Sure.
So as you pour it over, that flavour, that honey note that is so evident within here, because you notice your lips.
It's got
are
a
just-
compliment, yeah.
Yeah.
And that honey note comes out so much more. So yeah, the 10-year, even though it's a pure single malt, still a whiskey that you can enjoy in separate ways. And remember, all our whiskies that we have here, there's no right or wrong way to enjoy them.
Is there any Irish whiskey using the term single malt besides you guys?
So Irish whiskey, you have to be very careful about the terminology. So what we produce is a triple distilled single malt. And we're very, very proud to say that in every single bottle.
Yep.
Very proud. So you can see single malt, Irish whiskey, triple distilled. Now, obviously, there is different variants of Irish whiskey coming from different whiskey distilleries. I mean, we're actually now up to 24 whiskey distilleries in Ireland. I mean, the Irish whiskey market is just exploding right now. So there is different distilleries that are using single malt, but they're doing it in different ways, doing it in their way.
Is there the same restriction? So is it all 100% malted barley? What's the... I know like with Scotch at one point, the term single malt Scotch meant 100% barley, but now you can do blended and there'd be other grains used. What's the...
So single malt, in terms of the definition, has to be a single distillery coming from a single place. So everything's kept under one roof. So instead of, if you got 2 single malts that were produced at 2 different distilleries and brought them together, that's not single malt
Sure.
anymore. So single malt means it's all coming from the one roof, the one house, the one site. So you've got pure consistency, purity, if you
and it
wish.
doesn't have to be barley?
Well, to be a single malt, yes, it has to be 100%
Yeah.
malted barley. The moment you
I try to queue up a little
Yeah.
FYIs for the
yeah.
newer drinkers. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so basically, this is why the Sexton is an excellent entry single malt because of the cost point. It's a single malt that anyone can try. You don't have to be intimidated by a price to try great Irish whiskey, great single malt Irish whiskey. And this is why the Sexton makes so much sense. Obviously, as we go up in age, go up in different types, different variants, this is where it changes. This is where, as soon as you start to understand what Irish whiskey is, good Irish whiskey is, well, we can always cater for that little more of a refined palate,
Sure.
for a palate that understands what they're starting to look out for. And this is where I think it'd be a great time to even try our 16-year-old.
Let's do it.
So, what we've got right now is our 16-year-old single malt. So, anyone who is a fan of the Bushmills range particularly knows the fact that we do produce triple distilled single malt. This is a whiskey that will win over all hearts, all minds. Anyone who's into their deep peated scotches, this will still win their hearts and minds. This is the one that gives the wow factor. So the 16-year-old is what we call a 3-wood whiskey. It's a minimum 16 years in bourbon. It's a minimum 16 years inside sherry. And we then take those 2 minimum 16-year-old whiskies out, marry them together, and then we finish them for at least 6 months inside port wine pipes.
Port wine pipes.
Ruby port wine.
What's that? Pipes 550 liters, 550 liters, 500 liters?
Well, no, right now modern port pipes are back down to 200 litres.
Oh,
They're-
wow.
So the same capacity as bourbon barrels, but obviously the term pipes comes from the older way that they were produced. Now, obviously you can see straight away the colour.
It's intense.
That ruby
Stark.
red
It is.
coming through. Now, the nose of the 16, well, this is where it becomes really quite special. The nose of the 16,
You don't use any peat at all, right? But there's
We-
a phenolic note to this. There's like a very dry wine heaviness that comes on the finish here.
Yeah, and again, that's going to be that port influence. And remember the sherry cask in there for a minimum 16 years. So combining those two different levels, this is where that note will probably start to come through. Now, the palate is probably one of the most phenomenal things, because as soon as you take a little sip,
I'll do it.
you just notice that explosion of flavour. Caramelised fruit, toasted wood, toasted nut, almond as that keeps rolling down through the throat. And then the best thing happens, because now the body comes in. But the best thing happens now. It's this little afterglow. It's where the dark summer fruits, dark summer berries just
May
come
start
in.
sweating.
Oh, yeah. Well, weirdly, this has put me at ease right now. We should have started at
You're
this.
sweating now.
Yeah,
You're
I know,
sweating
right?
less now
If he
than
drinks
you did
that,
when
it's
you
going to
first
be
So I need a-
airplane all over. You know what I mean?
How many cigars?
So, weirdly, the best place in the world for me to enjoy this is not even in the distillery. It's not even in Ireland. It's just over in the West Coast. It's in a bar called the Occidental in San Francisco. And this bar, they have got a style of cigar that just perfectly complements this 16-year-old. Even when I was doing an event down in Miami, probably Cigar City, if you wish, within the United States.
Mecca, yeah.
Well, I raised a few eyebrows before anyone tried it that this is the perfect complement to a cigar. After we did the tasting, everyone came up because every flavour is so intense, but that berry sweetness is so distinctive. Well, that's always going to shine through. That's never going to get overpowered.
So what's this? I'm in 100% agreement that as we progress through these longer times and these old, I would say wine barrels, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's sherry or port, what's coming next? What's coming down the pipeline that you can talk about, if you can talk about any of that? Because this is fantastic. The 16, if you remember, at the event last week, you asked me if I had to choose a bottle to take home, what bottle would it be? And I asked for the 16.
You did.
And we have, for Halloween, as a family, we drank a lot of it. We
We
trick or treat
appreciate
through the
that, yeah.
neighborhood. Sometimes you need to cool off,
Yeah.
right? So we were very much a big supporter, and I smoked a cigar with it. So for those who were here in Houston last week, the weather was amazing for
Fantastic.
Halloween.
Yeah,
so
it
when
was
you're
great.
walking through
Finally,
and it's 60
finally.
degrees
Yep.
outside,
Yep.
you've got a glass full of 16-year-old Irish single malt and a nice cigar from Stogie's here in Houston. It was just like the perfect evening. I also had
I'll take you to Stokes.
I had a do you know Matthew Torregrossa?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
know Matt. Come
Yeah.
on.
Shot him out.
We know. I mean,
Yeah.
I know.
Stop
Come on.
dropping names.
Sorry.
You know, all of us
Torregrossa.
we're all Republic beverage people, by the way.
We all work together.
really?
We all work together.
All of us.
Okay, I
We
didn't
were
know
all
that.
there for all
I
of
didn't
us,
know.
yeah.
I knew Docs was, but I didn't know
Docs,
Matthew
yeah,
was.
all of us. Yeah,
But
Matt was too.
Matthew
Yeah.
is
Ray worked there for 46 years, so
really
Yeah.
every day.
Started when I was
So you
eight.
guys know Bob Shade and
Bob, real great. Yeah.
Bob Shot.
You know, the funny thing is, what I call him is Bob Shada on my
Shada.
Bluetooth.
Is that how you pronounce it? Is
Bob
Shada?
Shada?
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, on the-
Bob's a good friend of ours. Yeah, he's real good. Yeah.
Bob Shake. What's the iPhone?
Jamie Bell and,
What's the
and
name of the iPhone?
Got them all. We're all Republic beverage people.
Danielle
There's no doubt.
Story and
Yep.
the whole
Everybody
Nicholas
came out.
Talamantes. And
Absolutely.
RDC,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we
RDC,
Desi, I talked to today. Yeah.
every time I walk into Stogie's, and I
Yeah.
try to go in there at least once a week, no matter. It'll be random. It'll be like Thursday at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
I'll do an interview with like a comic, and it'll be like midnight. Matthew Torregrossa is there. Like he's always there. He's always got a cigar in his mouth, and he's always drinking bourbon. So
Shouldn't say that. I might get him in trouble. Hold on.
well, no, he's doing invoices or something. You know, he's doing expense reports. But I'm such a huge Matthew fan.
Bird Dog
and
has a
Stogie's
bourbon?
fan.
No, they do. I'm kidding you.
Calumet's got the black rack that I'm actually a fan of the black rack. But anyway, so what's coming down the pipeline for the Bushmills that you can talk about? Is there something that maybe is
So-
on the Cola website that I can just go look and be like, oh,
Okay, so
that.
in terms of cola, cola, yeah, okay. So obviously, we to bring in whiskies that we had at a very special event. If you check the cola website,
I'm looking now. Go ahead.
so there was an 11-year crystal malt
Yes.
that was inside former bourbon barrels.
Loved it. Loved
There
it.
was a former 18-year-old Bordeaux red wine cask.
I always find those particularly fascinating. It's bright red. It's bright. The wine influence on the Bordeaux, for some reason, I don't know what it is, but it's more of a kind of a bright red apple note as opposed to a deep dried fruit that you get from like you know what I mean? Like it's more of a brighter red fruit note than what else?
And that red wine, Bordeaux red, that's part of the First Grow series.
First growth, yeah.
So that'll give you an idea of what to expect. And then obviously we've got a cognac cask as well. Obviously in the airports, we have got the Caribbean rum cask.
Yep.
We're also using Dominican Republic rum cask.
I didn't know that.
And I think that is all I can say right now.
There's
obviously
nothing on the Cola website, by the way. In the last 2 years, there hasn't been so it may not be out yet.
Double secret probation, like Animal House. We're like double.
So
That's what we're on right now.
Basically, just keep your eyes on Bushmills. But remember, we've got 411 years of experience.
Yeah.
We've got 18 warehouses. We've got over 300,000 barrels. There is a lot of fun and interesting things in there. I mean, one of the things I miss most by working in the distillery was I could talk to the coopers. I could go up to the warehouses. I could see some of the things that were up there.
Just craziness,
yeah. I mean, this is why I'm smiling. I'm
scientist.
smiling so much now because there is so much up there that is going to see the light of day at some stage. But this is why I keep telling everyone, keep your eyes on Bushmills.
Okay,
because
so if you can't answer, just look at me. Don't react.
Blink once.
Blink once if yes. Blink twice if yes. Do you? So Bruichladdich, I had Alan Logan. He was the distillery manager for Bruichladdich here from Scotland, and I believe we were talking about what they're working on. There's this new wave of experimentation that's happening where distilleries overseas are aging and distilling traditionally not single malts made with barley. They'll have I think Bruichladdich got a rye that's aging. They just tried to, and he said it's the first rye out of Islay in X amount of years, right? And then I talked to Brendan McCarran from Glenmorangie, and he had said, no, there's a few distilleries that are. Is there anything at Bushmills currently aging that's not
standard?
Sure, that's a good question.
So basically, I think the one that
maybe so.
Crystal Malt.
Yeah,
and the Crystal Malt that we created for the 400-year anniversary. That's something to keep your eyes on, because I don't even know what wood we're maturing that all in. So there's even a lot of things I don't know. There's a lot of things that are kept so secret that nobody knows.
That's so exciting.
So this is why it's a good time to be excited about Bushmills.
Okay, so we only have
back on the bandwagon.
We have 007 of Irish whiskey.
We have 5 minutes left. Let's we got time for two more?
Yeah, 21.
21 and 12.
We have to through 21. Absolutely.
Excellent. So
21's got all kinds of stuff going on.
So the 21 year it's a whiskey that doesn't behave like a whiskey. There's going to be a minimum 21 years inside bourbon, a minimum 21 years inside sherry. We then take those two minimum 21-year-old whiskeys together, and we finish them for a minimum 2 years inside Madeira wine drums. Now, the reason I keep saying minimum is that we bottle everything at 80 proof, and we chill filter everything here. Now, to do that, we guarantee a consistency. We guarantee if it tastes the same today, it'll taste the same tomorrow. In 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, even on your deathbed, it'll always taste the same. But to get that same taste, we have to use whiskey barrels of different age. We have to use whiskey barrels from different warehouses, different areas within the warehouse. So as a result, there could be a lot more of an older whiskey in here, sometimes even significantly older.
How old are we talking?
More than 21.
Well, talk about age statement real quick. We have our age statement on here. Is there some talk about some age statement coming off some of the single malts?
Oh, good question.
Yeah. So for example, the acacia wood that we have coming out of the distillery, there's no age statement on that. The steamship range that we have in the duty-free market, there's no age statement on that. So yes, that is becoming a little bit more of a part of our family. What that means for the United States, again, only time will tell. This is, again, it's a very, very exciting time to be part of Bushmills. Not even to be part of the family, but even as a consumer, because things are changing. I mean, there's times even I'm surprised by what's happening. But the 21 year, we're in this age category of where whiskey's mellowed out, becomes subtle, becomes almost like a sleeping giant. Because on the nose, it's almost impossible to pick out a single specific aroma. You know, there's so much happening there.
There's a lot happening in here, especially on the finish. I can't put my...
Yeah, you can't put your finger on it.
I can't put my finger on what the finish
There's
is.
so much. And this is the reason why I say this is a whiskey. The only way to discover it is time. So this is the whiskey that I always say, if you're in the hotel lobby and you're waiting, you know, you've got about 30 minutes, you know, no one's going to bother you. You sit back in one of the nice comfy chairs. You see, for about those 30 minutes, you can take one glass, and for as long as you take with it, you're going to keep discovering something different with every nose, every sip.
It's not quite bourbon, it's not quite sherry. That finish is something unique, and I can't quite put my finger on it.
And you'll even notice that finish doesn't stop in the chest. It's going the whole way down.
No, and it's really comfy. It's really... it's not abrasive at all.
No.
Yeah.
I don't like to say the word smooth. I give smooth a hard time, but it's
I'd say it glides
coats
across
everything.
the palate.
Yes, glide. That's a great descriptor. Yeah.
So like one of the best things, like whenever you take a little sip, normally we talk about taste. It's texture. And the thing I love about this is that whenever you take a little sip, it goes sweet then dry, back to sweet, back to dry, and this sweet dry interplay bounces the whole way along.
Well, there's so many whiskeys you talked about that age themselves for 21 years and then 6 months in another wood. Mm-hmm. This isn't the case here. 21 years, you know?
Yeah.
You mellow those together, and that's where the complexity comes from. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and again, being in the era, what's the price point of, say, the 10, the 16, the 21? What
10's about $69 right there. 16 would be right there around $89, and then the 21-year-old, which we have over there, I think, be like $219 right there. So yeah, in that range, not only priced whatsoever, considering what you're getting right there.
100%.
Not whatsoever. Yeah,
each
very, very reasonable.
release,
There's no doubt about it.
minimum.
Yeah,
I mean, 16 years old for under $100 is just absurd.
I know it
nowadays,
really
yeah.
is. It really is.
Going back to that 2-year-old for 150.
So yeah.
And you say this one here, like it's
Hey, if you can get
probably
it.
21 years. He said Helen, our master blender. Here's a fascinating fact. I don't think you ever mentioned. She doesn't drink.
Yeah.
It's all done by nose.
Yeah,
It's everything
Which is unbelievable.
by nose, by knowledge. And that's the big thing about Bushmills, that we don't learn by your qualifications. You have to learn the Bushmills way. You have to learn from what happened to the predecessor, and the predecessor before that, and the predecessor before that again. So everything's being passed down from generation to generation to generation. And as these generations of master blender, master distillers to the next generation, this is the big difference.
yeah.
I had a dinner or a lunch with John Campbell from Lefroy, and he said, it's interesting when it comes to Ireland and Scotland versus America, we're very much about the up and coming new ideas and thought process of a younger generation. But in reality, when it comes to Ireland and Scotland, we figured this stuff out years ago.
Yeah.
You guys are still trying to figure stuff out. We already figured it out hundreds of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, the only thing we do now when I get the job of master distiller for Lefroy is just don't screw it up.
Yeah.
I mean, you can play with wood. You can play they said when they do the Carchus release, they will do a wet barrel and a dry barrel version of a new finish. Let's say a Madeira finish. They did one with Marsala once. He said, you try it with a dry barrel, you try it with a wet barrel, let it age, taste it, decide, is this usable? Can we do this? If not, it was a waste of an experiment. And it was. They couldn't do it with the Marsala, but they did it with the Madeira, and it was fantastic. And it was he said, the only thing I have to do to keep my job is don't screw up something that was perfected literally 5 generations ago. And when you talk about a company that has been doing this since 1608, it's like, hey, I don't even need to taste it.
I know, right?
I'll smell it.
Well,
It's
as
good.
Jack
This
said,
is great.
Helen doesn't even drink. That doesn't matter because, we have, 5 senses on our tongue? But your nose, you can train it for 30, 40, 50 senses. So you get a lot more from your nose than you do your tongue, your palate,
Sure.
so to speak, which is fantastic.
So, since we're coming to the end,
Yes.
what we have,
Special treat.
yeah, it was a special treat. So this is
You're welcome, Chris.
Put a little bit behind the ears.
I'm excited.
Right
I'm
here.
excited.
Here we
I'm
go.
excited.
My house.
So this is our distillery reserve.
And by the way, we hate Jack's accent with the ladies, by the way.
Oh, dude, he's got to be
It's-
crushing it.
it
You're not
works
married
for
or
some
dating
reason.
anybody?
You have.
I don't know why.
No.
Yeah.
Dude.
It shouldn't work.
I'm only just friendly.
Don't.
Just say y'all to you.
Stop.
Okay.
Jack Ferris.
He doesn't need any more.
He really doesn't. He really doesn't.
And he loves Texas. That's why.
Oh yeah, Texas keeps
We have a lot of very independent women here.
It's one hell of a state in Houston. Well, these gentlemen here,
New favorite.
How old are you, Jack?
Went to his
20,
first NFL game,
27,
Texas.
27,
They won.
27.
27
Again?
years old. You've
So
got
am
that
I.
accent and a full head of hair.
16
You're killing her, bro.
marathons.
Yeah,
What
I
else have you
know.
done?
So basically, this is a whiskey that we only keep at our distillery. It's available nowhere else in the world, only unless you walk in through the gates of the distillery and get down to the distillery.
I'm going to read it.
Or you have a podcast on ESPN.
Well, even I was surprised today whenever this appeared out of the literal, the flatbed, out of one of the trucks. I was like, how did this get here? So this is just how special it is.
Thanks, Toby.
If I can even be surprised, this shows you just how special this is. So I think it's time to toast.
Toast.
Absolutely, guys.
Thank you for
You have it?
Thanks so much for coming
You
on,
don't want my
guys.
toast.
Here,
You
let
know
me get
that.
in
You
here.
don't want my toast, Jack. Go with your toast.
So I'll say, here's to a long life and a merry one,
Yep.
a quick death and an easy one, a pretty girl and an honest one, a Bushmills and another
Another
one.
one.
Cheers.
Absolutely.
Everything I knew about the term single malt came from learning about Scotch. My understanding of Irish whiskey had a lot to do with picklebacks and shots in bars.
As we trace back the history of modern single malt, it really leads us back to here at the top of Ireland to Bushmills.
I like Bushmill single malt because honestly it surprised the hell out of me on this trip. The chance to come out and learn about it and actually see the countryside and be able to put a face to the country is something that's completely invaluable. Being able to walk around, smell the fermentation or see the environment that it comes from teaches you about the people who are making a spirit, and that's essentially distillation of who they are.
Bushmills has quietly, for hundreds of years, been making single malt. As far as we can tell, this is truly the home of single malt distillation.
There's not a better backdrop for a whiskey distillery. It's green and rolling hills and rocky cliffs. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful.
Bushmills is a magical whiskey. We're 100% malted barley, single malt distillery.
A single distillery made with 100% malted barley. Our tradition is smoothness, yet a richness of character.
I remember the first time that I had single malt Irish whiskey, and it really blew me away because the whiskey tasted like nothing else I'd ever had. And it was full of all types of interesting flavors that you don't often find in other types of whiskey.
I knew nothing about Irish single malt. So seeing a whole new world open up in terms of flavor, in terms of aroma, in terms of the process, in terms of what I understand about cocktails and what can go into them, that's pretty cool.
We made the original single malt. In fact, we've been making single malt that long, we just call it whiskey.
We have years and years of history. But the reason we have that is because we are the very best at what we do. The love and the pride of Bushmills speaks for itself.
I personally didn't know that they were given their decree to distill in 1608, making them the longest decree in the islands. Like, they have a bottle from the late 1800s that they can test and taste against everything they're doing now. They know that the recipe hasn't changed since at least then.
I had the privilege of tasting a bottle from 1882, and the taste and quality of that whiskey remains today. Yeah, all those years ago, we're still making the same style, we're still making the same quality, we're still giving the same taste.
To get that chance to drink a single malt with that kind of history and heritage, and that's what makes Bushmills not only different from other distilleries in Ireland and Scotland, but really something that's truly special and rare. Tasting whiskey from the barrel in the warehouse with the blender. I mean, it's
No complaints about this right
Nope.
now.
There's 400 years of knowledge being handed down from master distiller to master distiller. Trial and effort and different nuances and different cask types and different distillation practices that really brought to us where we are today with what is really Bushmills. There is a great science to it, especially in the distillation.
We rely on the water. The water comes from a tributary of the river bush called St. Colum's Rill, and it's the river bush that provides all the crystal clear, wonderful water. It's the same water that flows across the Giant's Causeway. We use the finest malted barley, and we use beautiful copper pot stills, and we triple distill, and that creates a truly spectacular spirit.
Crazy to me that all 10 of those stills are being run from this one control room. I'm watching like 3 stills back here and 1 over there. That's an amazing amount of control.
100 years ago, that would have been a lot more labor intensive to do all of this, right? I mean,
Yeah, so the same principles of, like, we'd have had the same stills, we would have had more people running. I like to look around here and we have this great contrast. We have the great traditional way of making whiskey still, but we have the modern control. But fundamentally, it's all about the taste, and the taste hasn't changed all those years. This is what Bushmills does, day in, day out, week in, week out, century after century. That's what we're good at.
Column produces this beautiful crystal clear spirit, and that spirit has all the richness and maltiness that is Bushmills.
Once we get into maturation, it really turns more into an art.
And you are the first female master blender in Bushmills history?
In Bushmills history, and indeed the history of Irish whiskey.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
My role is to select the casks, to mature it in, and to turn it into whiskey.
This is where Helen lives, this is Helen's domain, so this is where we look to start to blend and to actually use different types of barrels. We mix them together to form our single malts or to form our blended whiskies.
When Helen wants a barrel from up there, it has to come from up there.
And it's always up there.
There's a very special relationship with the casks. They're living, breathing, beautiful things. The pride that is in the distillery is that it doesn't really matter how much effort it takes. It has to be that perfect one. We're never in any hurry. We will wait till it's perfect. We have a whiskey for every palate here.
What's the whiskey for your palate?
10-year-old.
You have all these drinkers, and I'm sorry to say bartenders too, who are so militant about how you can and how you certainly cannot drink whiskey.
You'll always have purists that are like, how dare you? Like, I'm sorry, an 18-year-old single malt makes a really good old fashioned.
I personally think that people should drink whiskey the way they want to drink whiskey.
Cheers to that.
Somewhere along the line, the conversation flipped from these are the rules to no, drink it however you want. And that's finally starting to get across. And that's, I just think, just allowing people to explore more than they used to.
Without Bushmills, this idea of making single malt would have disappeared. It was Bushmills that kept single malt Irish whiskey alive for decades. That's why Bushmills is the largest producer of Irish single malt whiskey today, and why it's so well regarded for producing single malt whiskey.
Bushmills feels like it has been here forever. I think we are coming to a point where we're learning to cherish and honor things that have been done a certain way for a very long time, things that have their roots in decades and centuries ago.
From the moment you walk through the gates, you see the whitewashed buildings, you do fall in love with it.
All around you is a reminder of the craft that goes into making good whiskey.
Everything we do is for people to enjoy the finest whiskey in Ireland.
I think one of the great things about whiskey is there's always something new to learn. That's what keeps me coming back to the glass, and the opportunity to be here at Bushmills and to learn about something that in the back of my head I thought I knew, but turned into something completely unexpected is honestly the reason I keep doing what I do. It's an opportunity to talk with people, to learn, and to ultimately share. To me, that's what whiskey is.